For us, as a start, Source to Pay and More. We are the experts in digital transformation of Source to Pay. We are a boutique consulting firm originated from a knowledge network. Our mission since 2017 is to accelerate the Source to Pay field. So what we are doing, a lot of knowledge sessions in smaller groups, just to share experiences and learn from each other. We are also a consulting firm, not only a knowledge sharing firm, to say that, and we are delivering different kind of services, a lot of analysis, business cases, but also we do a lot of software selections. We are independent from software providers, so we are not an implementation partner or in any sense have formal agreements with software providers, so that we can also advise in an independent way. Of course, process design, rollout and implementation, we do a lot of these kind of assignments. If you look at where we are active, that's on the energy sector. Energy, infra and logistics is quite a big part. Also on government, financial, education, healthcare. These are the sectors that we are the most active in. Projects from our side normally takes around between 6 and 18 months, of course, dependent on the question. We already served around 100 clients. We work a lot with freelancers in our network just to make use of the experiences of that. And we have offices in Scandinavia and Oslo, and also in the Netherlands, where our head office is located. You see also some logos here that you possibly recognize. Yeah, that's I think about us. I think that's good and short enough for today. Then we can dive into the topic that we promised you today, and also the promise of AI. Okay, to start with AI, we see a very big promise of AI. This is enormous. High expectations, massive investments, but what is now the real value which is delivered today? This is AI, and especially generative AI is being hyped as a game changer. And the figures that you see also here show the promise. For example, here you see 55% faster cycle times that you see here. That's one of the reports which is going around the internet, simply by removing friction in intake and approvals. Well, that's quite a big change, I would say. Then you see here 72% reduction in ad hoc purchases. That's spend compliance, but 72% reduction, that's really a big change. So yeah, AI then basically nudges users to the right choices and really can reduce 72%. That's really big. And it of course raises all kind of questions also. You see here 29 days reduction in supplier onboarding time. Now, I didn't know it took 29 days to onboard a supplier, but that's a big reduction also. So there's a lot of marketing fizz around it. That's basically the message, but it's also quite serious. You see also here, if you look around here, the ecosystems, 130 billion of investments by the big tech, and that's really, it's getting really serious, I think. The stakes are high, even that the outcomes are maybe not really totally clear, but at least there's a lot of trust in this technology. And also from the government side, you have the EU AI Act, basically focusing also on how to interact with AI in daily life and what should be the boundaries of this. So all in all, I think, of course, it's hyped, but it's also quite serious. And I think it's really good to look, for adoption which is responsible and rational, I would say. So what are we not going to do today? We will not do a Copilot or ChatGPT course. We do that also in our earlier webinars, how to write a great ChatGPT prompt, for example. That's also important, but that's not the focus of today. Today we will focus on the integration of AI in source-to-pay tools. Therefore, of course, we have Ivalua here on board, which is very welcome to show us some concrete use cases they have in GenAI. They use it through all the steps. That's what they told me, and what Eric emphasizes also. But they will focus today on the use cases around contract management, supplier management, on category management, and on request. So basically to buy something. Then am I right so far, Eric? Yeah, I think
So
he's
just
not.
finding the unmute button, but yes, absolutely. Well, I think we see ourselves as the single code base suite in the market, and so we're going to show a little bit how these use cases can actually go across the entire source to pay flow here today.
All right, sounds good. And then another topic, procurement orchestration, is also one of the new topics in the field. So we will stand by a little bit on this topic to understand what it's really about. All right, then about AI. You see basically here 5 levels of AI, and it's good to understand a little bit more about what are we talking about now. So you see those 5 levels, and the first level is the broadest level, is overarching, is the umbrella term, and that's basically a term for systems that simulate human behavior. So they process data, they draw conclusions, and they solve problems. That's widely adopted, I think, already. For example, a chatbot that answers supplier questions automatically based on predefined rules. So the rule-based AI, I think you see it quite often. So therefore, you have also this indicator on the right that shows the level of adoption that we already see in at companies. Then the machine learning. Machine learning is then a type of AI where there's algorithms that learn from historical data. So that it's not needed to update it manually, machine learning, because it learns. And you see that a lot already in the purchase to pay process, for example, to suggest the correct cost center or GL account for an invoice based on past bookings. So that's increasingly adopted already. And then the third level is deep learning. Deep learning is, well, more complex. So it uses neural networks and it really learns complex patterns and outcomes. This is emerging, but it's quite limited in the source to pay field. We don't see that a lot. An example could be that you automatically identify product categories from unstructured supplier data. Yeah, that it really goes into free text descriptions and get yeah, a good outcome out of that. That would be interesting, I think, because data quality is normally quite an issue in every company. But we don't see already a lot of that running at clients. Then the fourth level is the large language models. That's what we are talking about a lot, like ChatGPT. It's trained on massive text data sets and it generates new content. And yeah, I think everybody knows already ChatGPT. Yeah? It doesn't need an introduction. It's actually actively evolving, I would say. I still got the orange color here because there's more talking about it still than really professionalize use at customers. It will take not over complete process steps. It's more like an assistant now, I would say. And examples will be shown, I think, later by Eric, for example, in contract clauses or these kind of things. There's interesting use cases on this. And then the last thing is the last level is agentic AI. That's I think popping up in the last months. I think the most advanced form, and that's a system that decides independently what to do, in what order, and also why. And important, I think, for agentic AI is that they not only plan and execute, but they also adapt to reach a goal. And that's, I think, where the smart thing happens, because we can set up a rule and then if then it will work, but it can also, if it also can adapt, then it's going really a level more smart. And what could be an example of this? An AI assistant that notices a preferred supplier can't deliver on time. It switches to an alternative, updates the PO, notifies stakeholders, and reschedules the delivery, all on its own. That would be interesting, I think, if we have these kind of AI bots running. So honestly, I think nobody has this already in place. So it's only about the talking yet. But it's the technology is coming there. So it's interesting to hear also how Ivalua, for example, is looking to this development later on. All right, so going to the interaction now, because it's not only sit back and listen today. We have to do some things. And the first poll that we have will be introduced by Natalia.
Yeah, so what is your initial feeling about using generative AI in the procurement process? So A, it sounds interesting, but I don't know where to start. I'm cautious, first see, then believe. C, we are already testing small applications, and D, we are actively using it for RFPs, contract, or analytics.
Yeah, so you can make your choice and make a choice and make a choice. Yeah, we see quite some answers coming in already. And yeah, I think we see here a really big group which is already testing small applications, and that's interesting. 50% of everybody, and 33% is saying it sounds interesting, but I don't know where to start. So that's really in the orienting phase. And also 70% is cautious, first see, then believe. So that's also quite a group. Maybe it's interesting if somebody can react on this, who is really already testing small applications. I'm not sure that who would like to say something about that. You can just speak via the microphone. Nobody? Nobody yet to share? Well, all right, that's also possible. We can do that later on. But it's always interesting, I think, to learn from each other if you're testing on a certain topic, how that's going. But let's move on then with the program, and maybe we can do that later. We have more polls. So then about procurement orchestration. That's also good. What is procurement orchestration? That's one new term which has popped up also last year. And it's a smart and central control of all steps, systems, and stakeholders in the procurement process. Wow, that sounds interesting. But it doesn't replace your existing tools, but it's a coordination between them. So for example, for procurement orchestration is a smart intake form that asks some questions to you and routes the request to the right workflow. For example, going to the ERP or a contract management system or legal system to automatically create an RFP, for example, or automatically order something, or to upload a new contract. So he basically intakes that and that's the first part, and then the orchestration is basically that there's a workflow system throughout the different applications, which could also be third-party solutions. Yeah, so that's procurement orchestration. We talked about intake management shortly already. Procurement orchestration, we know then what that is, and we know already what AI agents are. So I think we're quite okay on the terms, I would say. And then you see there's a lot of going on in software, in the software market. So this is a good chart from Deloitte, which shows how the procurement technology has exploded in the last 30 years. And I think a lot of people know already from the 90s and the 2000s, the SAP Ariba, which were one of the first. Then I think around 2000, Ivalua was set up. These were the big ones that, yeah, were basically doing the basic stuff. And now you see platforms like Coupa Ivalua, they are really expanding with full suite offerings. A lot of process automation is coming into really smaller solutions. And that's what you see the last year. If you see the explosions of those specialized solutions, which the scope is going is getting smaller and smaller, I think. And you see that on, for example, SRM, third-party risk management, on purchase to pay side, data analytics. You have quite some choices today, but also on supplier sustainability and carbon reporting. So there's today, I think, quite some tools to choose from. And of course, some of these tools will be acquired or will fade away. But not all things, not all tools will fade away. And I think the challenge for procurement is in the end to stay a little bit agile here also, maybe build a solid core, but keep also spaces on the edge of your total areas in procurement. Then, before we go to Eric, I think it's good to also look to what Gartner is saying. Gartner has every year this hype cycle. Possibly you know this already, but this is always interesting to see how they look as a respected firm to the developments in the different software categories. And I think the biggest takeaway of this picture is for today that the generative AI for procurement is on the peak of inflated expectations. That means a lot, I think, that there's a lot of, let's say, air around it. There's a lot of publicity about success experiences, and some companies take action, but most do not still. And we need to go through the through of disillusionment. That means that we need to start experimenting and see what's working and what's not working. And then it will, according to Gartner, will go into a productivity plateau in 2 to 5 years. So that's also not so far away, I would say. And the other thing which is cool, I think, on this picture is the autonomous part. So you see here autonomous sourcing. We are talking about this, I think, for years already, but now you see really the first software solutions coming up, and this, yeah, this is really going through the to the right side of this picture. So that it really is evolving now and is really happening. And the same counts for intake management and orchestration, which you see here. The challenges are still there. So data quality and systems integration, I think, are two main issues that needs to be taken care of. Yeah. Okay, looking to then also a bit to the time. I would say let's go to the next poll, Natalia.
Yeah, so where do you see the most potential for generative AI within procurement? A is supply management, B, sourcing and contracting, C, buying and invoicing, D, other, E, no idea, not working on it yet.
So yeah, you can make your choices in the screen. Yeah, we got 13 answers already, 14. And it's a race between supplier management and buying and invoicing. That's interesting, I think, the buying and invoicing part also. And I'm wondering, Eric, how do you look to those answers here? Supplier management and buying and invoicing. I would say my feeling would be A and B is quite that I recognize a lot. And on buying and invoicing, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how even it is to me. It's interesting that people are actually thinking that across really the source to pay cycle, people can think of probably things that can be automated, right? And you know, I think that's quite interesting with Gen AI in general, because I mean AI has been around for a while, right? But I think Gen AI has kind of shifted the way we think a little bit. And I think people really start to see where, you know, I sit and do this every day and I spend an hour here or an hour there. Be great if I could get AI to help me. And, you know, I already do this in ChatGPT. So surely, why don't we have it in the business as well, right? Why don't we have a business version of that that I can apply to my processes, to my contracts, to my buying, etc. So it's just really interesting to see actually the how even it is across the kind of source to pay process actually.
Yeah. All right, that makes the bridge also, I think, to the practice of today. So let's go into the system and also look to Ivalua, what you're having to offer. I think it's interesting that you already said that you have like a single code base, so you're not, yeah, you basically evolved from, let's say, yourself and didn't really took over a lot of little solutions. So I'm from integration point, that's of course the positive side, and I think you have to convince us today, Eric, what Ivalua can do in this space. So I would say the floor is yours.
Thank you. No, and that's a great introduction, right? And I think Robert Jan has already said many of the key points, right? We're 25 odd year old source to pay suite. We do really all of source to pay in Ivalua. We've kind of developed the solutions ourselves. So we haven't kind of bought any solutions, just like you said. And why we think that matters is that means single code base, means single data model. So when we start to talk about data for AI, it's really important that all the data then sits in the same platform. It doesn't sit in kind of separate different modules that can't talk to each other, because that really hampers that kind of data sharing for that purpose, right? So when we have, and yeah, sorry, you can feel free to stay on that past slide, please, Robert Jan.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you know, when we have kind of built AI into our solution, the way we thought about it is really what I just mentioned, right? Is that many people see the capabilities of AI really across the platform, right? Or across kind of the source to pay suite. And we've kind of also then built these use cases throughout. We haven't said, you know, this is only applicable in one area more so than others. And so actually, what I've done here is kind of taken this source to pay process. That's kind of the way that source to pay and more look at this process, right? Where source to contract to the left, the contract connecting to the buying and in receipting and invoicing journey to the right, the P2P journey. And I've applied just some use cases that we have available, or some of them that we're working on today. But you can kind of see here, right, that you already from supplier management, you know, supplier discovery. There was a study from McKinsey about a year ago where they actually say that now Gen AI is better at finding suppliers than actually supplier networks, which is crazy, right? It's basically disrupting that entire business model. And then through to kind of managing your category. We're going to look at how can you get support in managing your category. How can you get price benchmarks for your sourcing? How can you get help writing that kind of sourcing scope and building that RFX right? And then we're going to look at for the P2P flow, you know, how can you get help with buying? So for someone who's perhaps someone who never buys, right? How can they get help with being guided to do that in a natural, easy way, which is, I think, now really is kind of getting quite mature, actually, where you can actually just talk to the system in a conversational way and get guided to do what you need to do, right? And then throughout that flow, right, compliance review for your purchase order, any support with your issues, right, and so on, right? So a lot of use cases throughout we see. But one of the things I thought Robert Jan talked about before that I wanted to talk a little bit about before we actually show the use cases is around agentic AI. So how do we get there, and is it either agentic or it's not, right? So that's where I think we really wanted to share some kind of thoughts, right? Where on the 5th level here, these are basically generations to get to agentic autonomous agents, right? So on the 5th level, that's where we actually see kind of human in oversight. That's where the agents are autonomous and they can basically deliver what needs to be. So that may mean that you give a kind of a task to the AI agent, right, to source the following things, go and find bids for this, find a new supplier for XYZ, right? So that's really quite different. I think that's kind of quite far out today. That's really where everyone wants to go, right? But if we look on the other side here, the one-click features at the top, that's kind of the first generation of getting to there, right? That's where you, rather than having necessarily a chatbot, is where you have the ability to say, here is something that I want to action with AI. So that may be that, can you check this supply document, whether that is actually a valid document for what they say that is that our code of conduct, and is it signed, right? Many use cases where that is actually super helpful. That's actually perhaps all you need in that case, summarize my contract. That's kind of another typical use case, right? And that's often a good starting point as well. That's where people doing this every day can actually see that would help me a lot. And on generation 2, that's where we start to talk these multi-step skills or kind of flows. It's a little bit like, these customer service agents, but with natural language in addition, right? So think of what we talked about before, when someone needs to buy something. That is actually a good example, because that happens, 10,000 times a year, right? That's someone who doesn't buy every day needs to go in and just get help to get through that process. So that's like a very repeatable process in that sense. So what that means then is they can then get taken through a process which is structured. So it's kind of X or Y, but still with that natural language processing. So in that perspective, really quite helpful, but it is kind of not that intelligent from an AI perspective yet. And that's the difference with generation 3. That's where we still have these kind of flows. So it's kind of a pre-structured path. But the difference comes that we then have AI orchestration capabilities. We now have the ability to effectively action many different things with the AI. So we're going to show an example of that, where you can, for instance, take a document and extract information from that in that process. Let's say you have a quote from a supplier. Can I just upload this quote and you make me a purchase requisition? That's the kind of things that when you have that more AI orchestration capabilities, that's where you get these capabilities. And then the 4th level, I think that's where we start to really get to that kind of point where it feels agentic. That's the level where things really start to change. That's where the flow stops being predetermined. That's where we start getting reasoning involved. So then it stops being, do you want X, Y, or Z? And it becomes rather, based on what you're telling me and based on the context I have, I think we should do the following. So think of this, you're saying, I'm sitting on the factory floor, right? I've received something, and is there, there's a problem with this thing that I've received. What can I do? And then it says, okay, for that purpose, we actually need to create an issue, an exception with the supplier. I will also raise a credit note for these 3 items that have been broken. And yeah, I will direct that here. Am I okay to proceed? So that's where you actually get more intelligence, more dynamism in the way that you operate with the AI, but it's still human in the loop. It's still, I think we should do the following. Do you approve? Rather than the level 5, the fully autonomous, where it's just done for you and you're just more kind of watching it work through rather. Now, before we go, I was thinking before we go to that, are there any thoughts from anyone in the audience on how we see agentic AI and how we're going to get there? Looks like we've got quite a quiet audience today, perhaps. That's quite okay. But if there are any questions, do feel free to pop them in the chat. We are going to then show some use cases then. So with that, Robert, Jan, perhaps I take over the sharing.
Yeah, great.
Okay. I'm hoping everyone can see that now. Yeah. So we're going to look at a couple of use cases. The first one was the use case around, and I'm actually going to get up the slide here. So let's see. Of these use cases, we were going to start with the documentation agent. So this is more a case of kind of the early stage agentic AI, where it's kind of a relatively simple flow, if you like. But we're going to take some examples where our customers say that when they see this is where they really feel that, crikey, that would actually help me in my daily work, in my daily life, right? So first of all, we're going to look at a supplier documentation agent. So actually think of your suppliers, how many of their documents that you need to look at that they upload to be formally onboarded, ISO certificates, incorporation certifications, code of conduct, right? The amount of documents you look at is frankly a lot of waste of your time, or we can get AI support to do that instead. So I'm going to show this in a video. And so for this, we're actually logging in as a supplier to the Ivalua portal. And imagine then this is your supplier who've been told to upload a document, kind of mandatory documentation that they need to upload. And just, as standard for a long time in Ivalua, they get notified, etc., to where they need to go and what they need to upload. But the key thing here then is when they upload this document to Ivalua, the difference will be that they can actually then validate that document here, as we see. So as they click to do that, there is now an AI service. I'm going to pause it to show what actually happens. There's an AI service who says that actually this document is what the supplier says it is. It is a certificate of incorporation. It will find the kind of begin date and if there's any expiry date, right? Think of your ISO certificates. You perhaps want to know when they expire. And it will give a comment around what actually is that document, right? And why do I approve that document? So as the supplier submits that then, that is actually automatically approved. So no human will actually ever have to look at that document. That's as simple as that. So again, consider how many supplier documents you look at per year, and then think of how nice would it actually be to have all of that automated for you, to just have that done automatically. Okay. So, and again, do feel free to pop questions or thoughts in the chat. But one interesting thing we do here when we show this is kind of, well, is that fully realistic, because hold on a second, many of our kind of documents, are we really okay to give away just for the machine to do all of it? Don't we want to, for some documents, actually, we need to validate that they are correct? And that I think is quite key, because when we get to talking about agentic AI, it has to be parameterized. And what I mean with that is you have to be able to set the guidelines. So you have to be able to say that for some things, that is perhaps not quite as important. Like, do you actually need to look at every single code of conduct if an AI has done it? Do you actually need to check that, or are you confident that the AI do that good enough? But if we're talking documents that are perhaps actually quite critical, sanction statements, that kind of stuff, perhaps what you want is a recommendation for approval for the AI to say, I've looked at this, I've filled in the data, but you have to, kind of cast an eye on that to validate it before. You are kind of in charge of those parameters. And we think that's quite important when you build your AI strategy. It's not just AI does everything, it's you have to be able to set what the AI should and shouldn't do. Cool. The other use case that I wanted to show is still a documentation agent, but it's for contracting specifically. Stephanie, thank you. First question.
Yes, I was just wondering, Eric, is there also help in, sending out the request to the supplier that they should renew this document, for example, or is that still handled manually?
Indeed, and that, I think it's an interesting question, because it points at kind of where does the line go between kind of what the system kind of rule based should be doing, and where do we get kind of the AI support there? So typically the kind of reminders would go out with rule based. So it would be 30 days before the expiry of a certificate, the system sends an automated reminder, right? Email to supplier, link included, right? What we see perhaps more and more then is, could there be an AI assistance to that? Could for instance the supplier then respond to that email and say, here's my documentation, can you upload it for me? That's kind of, I think, where the market is getting to today, is kind of in that between. It's still, a lot of it is system based, and then there's kind of things that AI actions. So here we see that kind of particular point. But when it gets more agentic, perhaps it will rather be that you just reply with an email and the supplier doesn't actually have to go into the system, and that document is automatically uploaded, automatically validated. That's probably something that we'll see relatively soon, I think, in these suites.
Thank you.
I have a question around
Cool.
this kind of reminder about validity of documents already exists, for example, also in SAP, which is then linked, except the manual, the email notification to, for example, the contract partners. So what's
Exactly, Bengt, yeah.
Yeah.
And
what's
I think
the new of that?
Yeah, exactly. And the reminders in Ivalua has been around since, God, I think 2005 or something. So you're absolutely right. The reminders are nothing new, right? That is kind of, that is very much year 2000 technology. What's new is really the ability for the AI to action on the various parts here, right? So if the AI can actually upload this document from an email, if the AI can read that document and give a recommendation whether that is correct, and whether you are in charge of saying which documents for which suppliers should you just approve and which ones should you give a recommendation for, that's where the market is going, right? That level of AI today is where the market is today.
Okay.
Cool. And Marit is asking questions. I think, thank you, Stephanie, for opening all the questions. Appreciate it, because there was a few after as well. So thanks, Stephanie, for opening, and thanks everyone else for asking questions, because I think it's a little bit more interesting when it's a bit more interactive, right? And I think on workflows is an interesting question, right? Because workflows kind of have to be partially as per your organization, right? Because if we're thinking around the different types of organizations, just talking to Stefan here before we joined, and public sector will have kind of very defined workflows, right, where she works, that will have to be very kind of structured. It has to follow regulation, etc., right? Very, very much has to be like that. Whereas when we go to other companies, they perhaps want to have very lean workflows, very quick workflows, much more automation. And then we think good practice here is that you're actually able to say what that workflow should be. And that's what we're aiming to really enable across the entire suite then that we provide. Cool. But in the interest of time, just to make sure we can get through the videos, I'm going to move on to the next one, the documentation agent for contracts. And so here we're going to go to in the platform now. We're going to look at the contractual documents that we have. So here we're looking at a kind of a database of all of the contractual documents that you would have in your Ivalua instance, right? And what we can do then is, if, let's say, you know, the scenario, you're going into a meeting with a supplier and they're complaining about something, and you need to know what is actually said in my contract document, right? Now, then you can simply drag that to the AI assistant. And what will happen now is the AI assistant will kind of process this document, break this down into chunks, and kind of give you then a summary of what's actually in this document. And that's kind of good that you get that summary. But what I think is even more interesting is you can then actually chat with this document. You can do free-form natural language interrogations. So you can say, for instance, is there anything about warranties in here? Let me spell that correctly as well. But so then that's actually a free text request, right? And what we get as a response then is actually, yes, that contains warranty, and here's what it actually says. And you can kind of follow up even more, right? You can ask several follow-up questions and so on. Pull several documents in, you know, are there anything about prices? Which clause is that in, right? So you have the ability then to really interrogate that kind of data. Yeah, Robert Jan, please.
Yeah, interesting this, of course, and I think this is what you're used to with ChatGPT, for example. Also, I was thinking also about what's the level of accuracy here, because that's normally one thing that we acknowledge. Before, if you have Copilot, that's more a little bit less smarter than ChatGPT, and you have to trust, let's say, the system a little bit, especially in the beginning, to not go and look up yourself to check if the answer was right. So, what can you say about that?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I like that, and I think when we introduced this functionality, this was one of the first ones we introduced actually, and I think it's one of the first that typically our customers try out as well. I think we'll probably mute Bengt. I don't think it was actually us he was talking to. No, and it's typically one of the functionalities that our customers try and use first, right? Because this is one where people see, like, crikey, super useful. And frankly, if you don't implement it in your procurement system, what I hear is everyone goes with their company contracts to ChatGPT, and that's not a good thing, right? You really don't want that. That's your company data all over the internet after that. Now, to answer your question, in the beginning, when we introduced this a year ago, it was really a lot of hallucinations. It was a lot of things where you had to go, and it was like, well, it didn't really say that, did it? It was kind of a lot of weird things you were getting. And this is like, everyone's heard of hallucinations, right? But I think there's been a lot of development since that. There's been a development on the LLMs. That's one thing that hasn't taken away the hallucinations. What more has been development on is on our side, on kind of a tool provider side. So we now have backend functionality, backend agents, we call them actually as well, just to confuse things even more. But one of those is a quality agent. So they will actually, so when it actually kind of gives this information back, what happens is that in between that, there is someone checking, there is an agent checking actually what's being said to validate that against the document. So if I say, what is the price for laptop ABC in this document, and it spits out, there isn't a laptop, but it spits out a price anyway. The agent will actually go and check, okay, you said this, I will now go back into the document and see where you said you find this and what the value is. Is it there? Is it correct? And if not, I will ask you to redo that part. So that is actually now pretty accurate because we have that internal functionality to validate what happens.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Now, I think we're gonna perhaps skip the middle one because I realized we ran out of time. I thought we actually had a lot of time, but we only have 5 minutes left to wrap up or so. So I'm gonna skip this one. If anyone wants to see it, do send myself or Robert an email and we will set up something for you. But it's basically a way that you can kind of get all the recent information from the internet and kind of build category strategies for you, get support in that process. Pretty cool. So do send us an email if you're interested in that. What we wanted to spend some time on is actually that intake and orchestration setup, and we're going to show the example of buying something. Now, the way I think Robert was talking a little bit about intake before, the way we see it as intake, think of everyone in your organization needs to buy something, right? Or they need to do something. But they don't have the concept really of procurement, right? And not everyone thinks like us procurement nerds, which is quite possibly a good thing. But we then need to find a way to kind of funnel these requests. And it may be not the way we think. It may not say, I want to buy this. They may say, I need this. I need help with this. I need to talk to whoever. We then need to have this intake management to funnel them correctly. So let's play a video for that. And this is an example, right, of someone who goes in and wants to buy something in the platform. We're going to see how they get guided to do this and how that then gets orchestrated across the full source to pay flow. So they're simply saying, I want to buy something, and they get kind of questioned, then what do you want to buy? In this case, some soundproof office pods. Now they then get guided to the catalog, right? We see that they get kind of see the catalog. Is there anything available? It isn't. So then there will be kind of these smart follow-ups. So for instance, I think it's the following categories, perhaps. And do you know the supplier already that you want to use? So that's kind of the beginning of the follow-up. Then there's a follow-up for market price estimation. So that would be, to get help with actually buying this, what should your budget be? And finally, some more kind of follow-ups. But if you think about it, this is basically ways to fill in a request form, to fill in the information you need to buy something. But it's done in a kind of natural language, very easy to communicate in this way. And when all of that has been done, we see then that all the information has been filled in here. So the end user didn't need to know it didn't need to go to these kind of forms and figure out what all of these things mean, right? You can get that asked in a natural way. And that's the intake part. That's the way that you can just ask and you get guided. Now, the orchestration part is actually what we see here. So we see that has created this process flow for this specific type of request. In this case, a request of, buying something. And that will be, the first requisition. Then it will be a RFX because there is no supplier. So we need to kind of get 3 bids in for this. Ordering will an order will be created and a receipt will be created. But the nice thing about this intake and orchestration then is what we see. The first thing is for someone who has never ever used a procurement system before in their life, they see immediately here, right, that first thing that needs to happen is manager approval. That's the status that this request is in. And In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of this, but just to show that as a manager, then when they log in, the first thing that they will see is on their to-do list that they need to do something. They can click on that, approve it, and after they approve that, when we go back to the status, that automatically updates, right? So that has now got flipped to the procurement department, and they will then take that through the RFX process. So very simple for an end user then to see what happens, right? What needs to be done, etc. All right, and I wonder, yeah.
Can you just flip back to Eric? Can you just flip back to your dashboard, what you just showed some seconds ago?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when in this RFQ process, and you have zoomed in a little bit, so I cannot see that the Paretos and the pie graph a little bit lower. But where this when this kind of RFQ or demand comes up, where in this AI process comes in the strategic aspects of, for example, CTB's contribution to business, or with thresholds around that, and say when you have a spend distribution around your suppliers, and you want to balance it here, and where you have suppliers where you want to have a stagnation or a growth, for example, and gives this recommendation to a buyer.
Indeed, right. And I think that is a question that is kind of touching on different types of AI, because when we're talking about generative AI, they historically and still today really struggle with maths. And when we go into kind of, these, what you're talking about, kind of RFX allocations, awards, strategies, right? That gets quite complicated, because there's many different kind of sets of data that you need to take into account. And there's also many different calculations that needs to be taken into account. And there's typically an interplay here between what are kind of old school number crunching tools with dedicated AI, probably not generative AI, and the new generative AI, which is more kind of reasoning and helping and discussing. So the way we see it today is that these number crunching tools will not go away anytime soon. We still need dedicated kind of analysis tools that are run on logic and dedicated AI, whereas the generative AI is actually how you're going to perhaps chat about the recommendations and the possibilities. What happens if I do X, Y, Z? But that will be a layer on top of these kind of best-in-class analysis setups, if you like.
Yeah, because actually, when you talk about these AIs, this is something when you come into the strategic procurement activities, which really I'm searching for.
Maybe it's good also, Bengt, in terms of timing, because we are running really out of time now, to do a separate discussion on this, maybe after the session in a separate time slot. But thanks for the question. I think it's a good discussion. And maybe time also, Eric, with your approval to take over the screen again. And
Please.
Thanks a lot for your action on the screen. That's really cool. I think where we're going now is going to the closing, because there's only 1 minute left already. One thing that I would like to, the last words, I think, is how to proceed now with AI. Of course, we have Ivalua here, but it's good to have, let's say, a strategy in your company about how to get along with AI, to really get started basically, and explore what you really want out of it. And what we typically do is say, okay, well, start with defining your vision on it, formulate objectives, start with defining some promising use cases, which is really gaining the value in your organization, and then get started. So it's not about making big reports here, about engaging stakeholders. We need business, legal, IT here. You have to check what current systems already can do. A lot of these software solutions already do something in the space. And in the end, explore the market if that's needed. So which vendors support your use case? It's important to take this into account. So make sure that IT is engaged, look at your regulations, make a business case, make a planning, and do the pilots. Yeah, and of course we can help Source to Pay more in this space to do that. You not have to do it all on your own. So reach out to me or to Natalia if you're looking to this kind of strategy in your organization. Maybe the closing comments then for today. The next knowledge session is on September 11. Then we have also an AI session, then focus on Ignite, which is focusing more on the source to contract and analytics part of the source to pay process. We will have more source to pay solutions coming up from November. We are in talks with them. And also in October, we have a physical event with Inventura in Oslo. So you can just sign up on our website, sourcetopayandmore.com. Yeah, I would like today thank you for your attendance today, for the questions that came in, and for answering on the poll. So thanks a lot for today, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, all.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.